Is your animal being a brat when eating? Is your animal turning its nose up at every gourmet dish you serve it? You're wanting to tear your hair out because your animal is just point blank refusing to eat. This might be the video for you. What's up all you cool snakes and neonates? How's it going? I hope you are all keeping well. So today we are going to talk about possibly the thing I get messaged about most. I get loads of people constantly asking me, Reptile Rich, my animal's not eating. How can I get it eating? Have you got any tips or tricks for me? Well, with a couple of species, I actually do have a couple of little tricks and tips for you guys. So, tricks and tips? Tricks and tips! So let's get into it. Now, one of the main problems I actually find is not with the animals themselves, but with the keepers panicking too soon. Remember, a lot of these animals will, in the wild, go for sometimes months without food, depending on your species, of course. Marley here, our common boa, he goes off food for about 2 or 3 months he doesn't eat for. And that is not unusual. It's nothing he can't handle. It is usually around about breeding season, which is usually, I find, the main reason for your animals not eating. When I have people come to me asking why their animals aren't eating, it's usually at this time of year. So when it's winter time, when the temperature of the air cools down, they will stop feeding, and that's because that's when breeding season usually kicks in and their mind is only on one thing. Just like Marley here, their mind is only on finding the ladies, isn't it? Even though there's not even a female common boa in this room, Marley here every year goes off of food. Yes, you do, my handsome man. And that is even if the enclosures are the same temperature. They are that sensitive, they will feel the temperature drop, the atmosphere change outside of your house. So these guys are in their own vivs, which is inside a reptile room, which is kept at a certain temperature thanks to the vivs regulating. And even outside their houses, outside the room, they can still feel the difference in temperature, the difference in atmosphere outside the building, which is absolutely crazy. So, number one question you guys want to be asking yourself is, what time of year is it? And does that species often go off food at that time of year when it comes to breeding season? Alita here, our Argentinian black and white tegu, is another example of at certain times of year she goes off of food. But then again, in the summertime, she can be an absolute brat as well. If you watch her in this clip here, you will see her pushing the greens to the side just to eat the meat, even though she should eat both. She is what I call, and have called many times on this channel, an absolute brat. If it's not her way, she don't want it. And she is a nightmare to get eating at the best of times. Meat is normally never a problem, but veggies and greens is quite difficult to get into our girl Alita here, especially during her brumation period. Brumation is like hibernation for reptiles. So mammals will hibernate, reptiles will brumate. This means that they go to sleep through the colder months, they'll burrow down, get away from the cold and become inactive for a couple of months. Now sometimes they won't completely go to sleep, sometimes they'll just get really sluggish and slow, they'll stop eating as much, and that's because they're not getting the heat, the basking that they need to digest that food. Now with some animals, like Mr. Nubbins here, it is a case of finding what they want to eat, finding what they like and what their preferences are. I have a strong feeling Mr. Nubbins here, before he came to us, ate solely bugs and beasties. Not only the fact that he has metabolic bone disease, which is a disfigurement caused by incorrect calcium or incorrect lighting, so the body can't absorb that calcium. So I have a funny feeling he hasn't had the right diet, which is really hard to get him eating greens. What I find is cut them into small pieces and hand feed them. He will often take it. As you can see there, he has to be hand fed. There you go, my liege. Normally he'll only take about 2 or 3. Curly Kale and the likes of Curly Kale, I can't remember what the other one was, but there's another one that's just like Curly Kale, are his favourites. That's usually the only thing he will eat. There you go, my sir. There you go, good lad. So This is actually progress. He never even used to eat this. He went a long time without eating because no matter what I did, I couldn't figure out what he would eat outside bugs and beasties. And of course, he needs a balanced diet. He needs some veg in there. Oh, 3 branches today. Look at that. 3 leaves. However, if you're struggling to get your bearded dragon to eat greens, I've recently discovered a miracle feed that can help with that. Would you like a 4th one? Or is that you done? Would you like another one? Sometimes the movement will instigate it. There you go. Oh, Mr. Nobbins, I am so proud of you. Well done. Well done, my liege. If I put this in his bowl, he won't touch it. Has to be hand-fed from his perch. This is his favourite place to sit. Isn't it? So this is something, as I said, I have discovered recently. And that is dragon gel. I realise this might be backwards on the video, but because we're on the reverse facing camera. But this is dragon gel. I picked this up from Pets at Home. It comes in like a tube like that. Now, it is slightly expensive. It's £10 just for that little tube. But, oh, is it a godsend. Like I said, Mr. Nobbins here is extremely fussy. He's very hard to get greens in him. If you go by the packet, this stuff here has everything in it. It's got mealworms. What has it got? Let's read it from the packet together, guys. So it has rich in mealworm, silkworm, vegetable ingredients, like Japanese mustard. Spinach contains all the necessary nutrients for vegetable and insect-eating reptiles. It's got no need for calcium dust, so it must have calcium dust mixed into it. Everything needed is mixed in. Now, it says this could be a sole diet, which is probably true for younger bearded dragons, but for your older bearded dragons, I would definitely try and give them that full-on mixture that you can. He's eagerly awaiting this. So, with Mr. Nobbins, this has become our feeding regime every couple of days. I'll hand feed him a few bits of spinach. I'll give him some of this, about 2 or 3 splotches of it, and then we'll get some crickets out and feed him some calcium dusted crickets as well on top of that. But yeah, so bearing in mind, Mr. Nobbins here is a picky eater. Doesn't even let it get out of the tub. Another bit, son? Now, I realise this doesn't look very appetising. And trust me, it doesn't smell appetising when it goes in one end and out the other end as well. But it gets Mr. Nobbins eating very well. So as you can see, right there, there's a bit in front of him and he's not touching it. But if I start to move it, look at that. Look at him. It caught his eye there. He goes, "Is it too far away from you, my lord?" It was too far away from me. That's how picky an eater and how lazy a little man this is. As you've seen, there's a little bit of movement there and it piqued his interest. So there is another tip for a lot of picky feeders as well. Is sometimes movement can be the key. Whether it's a snake, whether it's the way you bounce the mouse about, or where you hold the mouse up in the air or down on the floor. With lizards, sometimes they need that movement, that live prey to get them eating. So we're going to get him a couple of crickets here. The calcium dust I really stick over their heads to slow them down. But there you go, look at that. Look at the movement. Boom. Chases it down. Now this is a lizard that I couldn't get eating for months until I figured out this is what he needs. This is the routine he needs and these are the things he needs to get him eaten. If I put crickets in his enclosure, he won't really bother with them. They'll get out of his reach pretty quickly. I don't know if that's because of his MBD or if that's just him being a lazy little munchkin, as you guys have seen he is already. If I put greens in his enclosure on the ground, he'll leave them there literally to rot, which has happened in the past. He's literally just left them there for days and not bothered with them. So sometimes learning a reptile's personalities and exactly what they like is a handy thing, isn't it, my Mr. Nobbs? Oh, don't you shove me off? Why you do that to me? I didn't shove your daddies. Believe it or not, Mr. Bowser here was a problem feeder when we first got him as well. It was a nightmare to get him feeding. We used to have to do this trick where I would put him in a separate container and I would actually physically have to annoy him with his food, whether it would be a pinky mouse, which is a rare treat for the African fat-tailed gecko, or a cricket. What I would do is I would literally pester him with it, push it into the corners of his mouth there, and actually annoy him with it to the point where he would bite it, not hurting him, not physically ramming it into his mouth, just rubbing it around his mouth until he got annoyed enough that he would bite it. And then once he bit it, he would instinctively just eat it. I've had about 3 or 4 people message me with geckos they couldn't get feeding. I told them this trick, and the first time they tried it, they got back to me and they said, that really worked. That was fantastic. You should tell other people about that. So there you go, guys. If you have a gecko that's a problem feeder and there's no reason for it, there's a good trick to get your little gecko feeding. And now, in his enclosure, he just eats whenever he wants it. I drop a few crickets in there and he pounces on it. He needs the stimulation of live prey, that moving prey, to get him going. And if you have ever had the joys of owning one of these wonderful animals here, the royal python, you will know how sometimes they can be very tricky to get eating. You can look at one the wrong way and it'll stop eating. It cannot like the colour of the sky outside, the shade of the blinds you've put up, where whatever football team is in the league is. That can put them off of their food, honestly. There's no reason or rhyme to it sometimes with these guys. They can be very tricky eaters. This girl here, Cookie, she will only eat if she is in a certain size enclosure. It must be quite small, almost smaller than I would like to give her. But what she likes is what she gets. Often when you put reptiles, especially snakes, in too big an enclosure, it can be far too daunting for them, far too scary. They'll get stressed out with that amount of space, and the last thing on their mind will be eating. First thing, of course, protecting themselves and staying out of danger. So sometimes giving a captive bred animal too big an enclosure can actually be detrimental to the animal's survival or thriving. So this girl here is only in a 32-litre rub, just a tiny little tub, just enough space for a hot side and a cold side. The cold side's taken up with her hide, and there's a little water bowl in the middle, and that is it. She will only eat through being what's called drop fed, which is where you put the mouse in the enclosure, put the lid on it or shut the door, whatever, and you walk away and leave it. And by the morning time, you go in and her mouse is gone. So that is how she eats. She will not strike feed. You can dangle that mouse in front of her till the cows come home. She will not eat. Put it down and go away and she will eat. On the subject of royal pythons, a subscriber of ours, the same guy actually that we got Evie, our P. regalis from our tarantula, he came to me and he said, look Rich, I am struggling to get my royal eating. Now, it was a little bit young for the time of year to be affecting it, but it was a royal python, so who knew? So it hadn't eaten in a month or two. Now, when it came to me, it was not in bad shape. So it was another perfect example of the keeper just getting a bit more worried than they should have been, because it was perfectly fine. It was winter time here in the UK, so a lot of animals are off food right now and not eating. Especially males, they're the ones that typically don't eat through the winter. So I took it in and I tried a very typical technique that I use with royal pythons. And what I do is I take the mouse, and as the animal is recoiling or cowering away from it, as it pulls its head back, in one of the S's in one of the coils of the body, I will press the mouse into that coil. As it pulls back, it can often spark that sort of constriction instinct, and they will hold on to it. So what I did with this one is I let it hold on to it, I put the hide back on top of it and left it, and lo and behold, morning time I came in and the mouse was completely gone. The first time we tried, and boom, just with a little bit of technique, he ate. I've heard from that guy now, and he has eaten twice since he has went back home. So he's eaten every week he has tried to feed him, which is absolutely fantastic. So there we go, the old owner's mind's at rest, and that little beautiful banana something royal python, whatever it was, is now eating, which is great. Another thing to think about is the housing, where your animal lives. A lot of snakes and things like that will get freaked out in too large of an enclosure, will get a little stressed out, especially your smaller, younger snakes. They don't like terribly big spaces. They feel vulnerable and won't want to eat because they're constantly stressed out. You guys know what it's like when you're stressed out over something and you just really can't be bothered eating. Animals will do the same thing too. And on the topic of their housing, are the insides of the house correct? Does the animal have plenty of places to hide? Does it have enough water? Is the humidity correct? Is the temperature correct too? Can it cool down when it's too hot? And can it heat up when it's too cold? Hello, sweetheart. Because if the animal is too cold, it will not want to eat because it won't be able to digest that meal, and the meal can physically rot inside of its tummy. Another thing you can ask yourself is, what time should the animal eat? Some of them are nocturnal hunters, some of them are diurnal hunters. Last night I defrosted a rat for our Chi-Chi, our mangrove snake, which is a nocturnal hunter. I always feed her about 10, 11 o'clock at night when it's dark. I see her active, and that's when I pop a mouse in. I accidentally defrosted her mouse a little early at 8 o'clock last night, so I decided I'll leave it in the enclosure because sometimes the smell of a rat in the room can excite the snake and get the animal ready to feed. So I left the little mousey in there to let her sort of get excited about it. At 8 o'clock, went down the stairs, came back up at about 10, 11 to feed her. The mouse was gone. She had helped herself. So Chi-Chi, our mangrove snake, might be a drop feeder. So we'll let you know on the next episode if that's what she is. So if your husbandry is right, the time of year is right, you have tried multiple different food items, prey items, because some animals will eat mice, some will eat multi-mammates, some will eat rats. Some animals in particular will only eat a certain thing. Some of the larger snakes will only eat rabbits and not rats, and vice versa, and all that kind of stuff. If there is no other options, if your animal is losing weight and is not putting on and is not eating for no reason at all, there are two very last possibilities. One that I really don't like is resorting to live feed, live mice. Now, the reason that should be a last resort is one, as I always say, frozen thawed is readily available, so there should be there's no point in causing that mouse any extra harm than it needs to. And two is that sometimes the mouse can actually bite the snake and cause the snake injury or even death through bacteria and things like that. So it's a risky business. Live mice doesn't work with snakes. You've got one last option, and that is assist feeding. Now, do not attempt to assist feed if you don't know what you're doing. Only assist feed if you have been shown by someone who's competent and confident enough to do it. I did film a video of me assist feeding Chi-Chi, but I've accidentally deleted it, and I've decided I'm not going to put this in here anyway because that's not something I want people trying to do if they really don't know how to do it. I may do one in the future, we'll see how that goes, but for the time being, if you guys are at wit's end, maybe contact a friend or someone who is very experienced with keeping animals. You'll find breeders have to assist feed their babies quite a bit because a lot of the babies won't eat. So try and maybe contact a breeder and find out how to do this. It's basically just holding the snake, sort of gently pushing the mouse into the mouth of the snake and then letting the snake eat it thereon afterwards. But there is a technique and a way to do it, and it can go wrong. So really do not try and force a mouse into your snake's mouth if you do not know what you're doing, guys. So there we go, guys. A little recap of the points you want to think about if your animals are not eating are time of year, time of day, type of prey, housing, and feeding technique. So guys, that's all from me today. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, like the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell button, share the channel around. You guys know what you're doing, you awesome bunch. From me, the rest of the gang, the problem feeders, and the great feeders, take it easy. Peace.
I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.